Maya Chen stared at her phone screen as another delivery request popped up. Another pizza run to the government district. Another night of being invisible while carrying someone else's dinner through the marble corridors of power. She had no idea that in 18 months, those same hallways would echo with her footsteps as she walked into a congressional hearing to testify about the biggest intelligence breach in modern history. But that night, adjusting her worn delivery bag and checking her motorcycle helmet, Maya was just another face in the crowd of gig workers keeping the nation's capital fed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The irony wasn't lost on her that someone with a master's degree in international relations and fluency in 4 languages was delivering pepperoni pizza to the people making foreign policy decisions. But student loans don't care about your credentials, and neither do landlords. So Maya Chen, former Georgetown honor student and current economic casualty, strapped on her helmet and rode her beat-up Yamaha into the night, completely unaware that her greatest weakness was about to become her ultimate strength. Maya's alarm buzzed at 4:30 in the morning, the same time it had buzzed every day for the past 8 months. She rolled out of her studio apartment bed, stepping over textbooks she couldn't afford to sell and passed, a diploma that felt more like a participation trophy with each passing day. The mirror reflected back a 26-year-old woman who looked older than her years, dark circles under intelligent eyes that had once sparkled with ambition. Her Uber Eats uniform hung on the back of her door like a daily reminder of dreams. Deferred. Red polo shirt, black pants, and the insulated delivery bag that had become as much a part of her identity as her own shadow. Maya pulled her long black hair into a ponytail and grabbed her motorcycle keys, preparing for another day of being professionally invisible. The morning briefing at the Uber Eats hub was the same routine it had always been. 30 drivers gathered in a fluorescent-lit room that smelled like coffee and disappointment, listening to Supervisor Derek Williams drone on about delivery times and customer ratings. Maya sat in the back as she always did, taking notes in a small notebook that most of her fellow drivers assumed was for tracking tips. "Chen," Derek called out, reading from his tablet. "You're on downtown government district again today. Lots of lunch orders from the federal buildings." A few drivers chuckled. The government district was notorious among delivery workers for long security lines, complicated building access, and federal employees who tipped like they were spending their own money instead of taxpayer dollars. It was considered the least desirable route, which is exactly why Maya always got assigned to it. "Lucky you, college girl," muttered Jake Rodriguez, a driver in his 40s who never missed an opportunity to remind Maya that her education hadn't prevented her from ending up in the same place as everyone else. "Hope those fancy degrees keep you warm while you're waiting in security lines." Maya didn't respond. She'd learned months ago that defending herself only made the teasing worse. Instead, she gathered her things and headed for her motorcycle, checking the delivery app for her first order of the day. Luigi's Authentic Italian to the Department of Commerce. Estimated delivery time, 35 minutes including security screening. The ride through Washington, D.C. morning traffic was a meditation in frustration. Maya weaved between cars filled with people heading to jobs that mattered, jobs with benefits and retirement plans, and the kind of respect that came with business cards instead of delivery bags. She knew this route by heart now, every traffic light and shortcut, every security guard's face and building entrance. The Department of Commerce security checkpoint was staffed by Officer Patricia Williams, a middle-aged woman who had been checking Maya's ID every day for months without ever acknowledging that they'd developed a routine. Maya pulled out her driver's license and delivery confirmation, waiting as Officer Williams ran the same security check she'd run hundreds of times before. Another pizza delivery, Officer Williams said, not really talking to Maya but rather filling the silence with official-sounding observations. Seems like you people eat nothing but pizza and Chinese food. Maya wanted to point out that she wasn't responsible for what federal employees ordered for lunch, but she'd learned that engaging with security personnel only slowed down the process. Instead, she nodded and waited for the bag inspection, watching as Officer Williams poked through the insulated delivery bag with the same thoroughness she'd shown every previous day. The elevator ride to the 15th floor gave Maya a few moments to study the building directory. Department of Commerce, Bureau of Economic Analysis, Office of Trade and Industry Information. She delivered to most of these offices multiple times, carrying food to people whose daily decisions affected international trade policies and economic relationships that rippled across the globe. Room 1547 housed the East Asian Trade Analysis Division, where Maya was delivering 2 large pizzas and a bag of garlic knots to people who probably made more in a month than she made in a year. She knocked on the door, announcing herself as requested, and waited for someone to collect the order. The woman who answered the door was Dr. Jennifer Park, though Maya only knew her as the lady who always orders extra Parmesan packets. Dr. Park was in her early 50s, wearing the kind of professional attire that suggested authority and expertise. She glanced at Maya with the brief, polite attention most people gave to service workers, signed the receipt, and closed the door without a word. Maya stood in the hallway for a moment, looking at the closed door and wondering what kind of work happened behind it. Her international relations background made her curious about trade analysis, but her current job description didn't include asking questions about economic policy. She was just a delivery person, invisible and unimportant. The next stop was the State Department, a building Maya had visited hundreds of times, but never really entered in any meaningful way. Security was tighter here, the guards more serious, the atmosphere more charged with the weight of international significance. Maya went through the same routine: ID check, bag inspection, escort to the appropriate floor. Today's delivery was to the Office of Intelligence and Research, specifically to someone named Marcus Thompson, who had ordered what appeared to be enough Chinese food for a small army. Maya followed her security escort through corridors lined with portraits of former secretaries of state, past conference rooms where she could glimpse people in expensive suits discussing matters she could only imagine. Marcus Thompson turned out to be a harried-looking man in his 30s who answered the door of his office while simultaneously talking on a secure phone and typing on his computer. He gestured for Maya to set the food on his desk, which was covered with documents marked with classification stamps she'd only seen in movies. "Just put it anywhere," Marcus said, barely looking up from his work. "The money's on the desk." Maya set down the bags of Chinese food, her eyes inadvertently scanning the papers scattered across Marcus's workspace. Her language skills automatically translated fragments of text in Mandarin and Korean, catching glimpses of what appeared to be intelligence reports about trade negotiations and diplomatic communications. She forced herself to look away, reminding herself that she was just there to deliver food. But as she picked up the payment from Marcus's desk, Maya noticed something that made her pause. One of the documents, partially hidden under a takeout menu, contained information about ongoing trade negotiations that contradicted everything she'd been reading in the news. According to the classified briefing, the United States was secretly considering trade concessions that would significantly benefit Chinese manufacturing at the expense of American workers. Maya left the State Department with her mind racing. Her academic background had taught her to recognize the significance of international trade policy, and what she'd glimpsed suggested decisions were being made that the American public wasn't aware of. But she was just a delivery driver, and classified documents weren't her business. The afternoon brought more deliveries to more government buildings, each one a reminder of Maya's position on the outside looking in. She delivered sandwiches to the Pentagon, coffee to the CIA's Public Affairs Office, and sushi to a think tank that specialized in foreign policy analysis. Each stop reinforced the same pattern. Maya was visible enough to pass security screenings, but invisible enough that no one paid attention to her presence. It was during her final delivery of the day, a late dinner order to the National Security Council offices, that Maya's invisibility became something more significant. The NSC building was nearly empty at 8 p.m., with most of the day shift having gone home hours earlier. Maya's footsteps echoed in the marble corridors as she made her way to the after-hours pickup window. The security guard on duty was someone Maya hadn't seen before, a young man who looked barely old enough to be working government security. His name tag read Johnson, and he seemed nervous about handling the evening protocols. "Delivery for the NSC night shift," Maya announced, holding up the bags of Indian food she'd picked up from a restaurant across town. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Guard Johnson consulted his clipboard with the concentration of someone still learning the procedures. "I'm supposed to escort food deliveries after 7 p.m., he said, more to himself than to Maya. "But I can't leave the desk unattended." Maya waited while Johnson tried to figure out the protocol for her delivery. Through the glass partition, she could see him making phone calls and checking multiple binders of procedures. Finally, he came to a decision that would change everything. "Look," Johnson said, buzzing Maya through the security door. "The food goes to office 437. Just take the elevator to the 4th floor and follow the signs. Drop it off and come right back." Maya found herself walking alone through the corridors of the National Security Council, carrying dinner to people who made decisions about international crises and national security threats. The building felt different at night, quieter, but somehow more intense, as if the weight of global responsibility pressed more heavily in the darkness. Office 437 belonged to the crisis management team, and when Maya knocked, she was greeted by Dr. Sarah Kim, the Deputy Director of East Asian Affairs. Dr. Kim was clearly pulling an all-nighter, her professional demeanor slightly frayed around the edges from exhaustion and stress. "Thank God," Dr. Kim said, taking the bags of food from Maya. "We've been surviving on vending machine coffee for the past 6 hours." As Dr. Kim signed the receipt, Maya caught a glimpse of the crisis management center behind her. Multiple screens displayed maps, news feeds, and what appeared to be real-time intelligence updates. The main screen showed a detailed analysis of Chinese military movements in the South China Sea, with timestamps indicating the information was less than an hour old. "Excuse me," Dr. Kim said, noticing Maya's attention. "I need to close this door." But in that brief moment before the door closed, Maya had seen something that would haunt her for weeks. The intelligence analysis on the main screen suggested Chinese military activities that were significantly more aggressive than anything being reported in public news sources. Ships moving into disputed waters, aircraft conducting surveillance, flights over sensitive areas, and submarine activity that suggested preparation for something much larger than routine exercises. Maya rode her motorcycle home through the empty Washington streets, her mind processing what she'd witnessed throughout the day. The classified documents at the State Department suggesting secret trade concessions. The NSC Crisis Management Center tracking unreported Chinese military activities. The disconnect between public information and classified reality. She understood that her position as a delivery driver gave her access to information that most people never saw. But she also understood that she was supposed to pretend she hadn't seen it. The invisible woman was supposed to stay invisible, to deliver food and disappear without curiosity or questions. But Maya Chen had spent 4 years studying international relations and 2 years working toward a master's degree in foreign policy analysis. She understood the implications of what she'd witnessed, and she couldn't simply pretend it didn't matter. That night, Maya sat in her studio apartment surrounded by her old textbooks and wrote detailed notes about everything she'd observed. She told herself she was just processing her thoughts, not planning anything specific. But deep down, she knew that her life as an invisible delivery driver was about to become something much more complicated. The irony wasn't lost on her that 8 months of being dismissed and overlooked had positioned her to see things that trained intelligence analysts might miss. Her invisibility had become her advantage, and her supposed failure had placed her exactly where she needed to be to stumble upon information that could change everything. Maya closed her notebook and tried to sleep, but her mind kept returning to the classified documents and crisis management screens she'd glimpsed throughout the day. Tomorrow would bring more deliveries, more opportunities to be invisible in places where invisibility meant access to truth. She had no way of knowing that her curiosity about the disconnect between public information and classified reality would soon turn her from an overlooked delivery driver into one of the most important intelligence assets in American history. Or that the same invisibility that had made her feel worthless would soon make her invaluable to people who understood the true significance of what she'd begun to uncover. Maya Chen fell asleep that night still believing she was just a failed graduate student delivering food to pay her bills. She would wake up the next morning and begin a journey that would transform her from the woman nobody noticed into the person everyone was looking for, carrying state secrets in pizza boxes and changing the course of international relations one delivery at a time. The invisible woman was about to become the most visible person in Washington. But first she had to learn that sometimes the most important intelligence comes not from sophisticated surveillance systems or trained operatives, but from someone humble enough to listen and brave enough to act on what they've heard. Maya's morning routine had evolved over the past 3 weeks into something that would have surprised her former professors. Before checking her delivery app, she now spent an hour transcribing and analyzing the fragments of classified information she'd observed during previous deliveries. Her studio apartment had transformed into an amateur intelligence analysis center, with maps of East Asia taped to the walls and timelines of military movements sketched on poster boards she'd bought from a dollar store. The notebook she carried during deliveries had become something more sophisticated than a tip tracker. Maya had developed a system of shorthand that allowed her to quickly record document classifications, personnel names, and conversation fragments without appearing to take notes. To anyone watching, she was just another delivery driver checking her phone or adjusting her delivery bag. In reality, she was conducting surveillance on the most sensitive intelligence operations in the American government. Her breakthrough came during a routine delivery to the Defense Intelligence Agency, a building she'd visited dozens of times, but never with the systematic attention she now brought to every assignment. The DIA cafeteria had ordered 30 sandwiches for a working lunch, and Maya found herself navigating corridors filled with analysts and officers, discussing classified operations with the casual authority of people accustomed to handling state secrets. The conference room where Maya delivered the sandwiches was hosting a briefing on Operation Silent Current, a classified surveillance program monitoring Chinese military communications in the South China Sea. Through the open door, Maya caught fragments of conversation that painted a picture far different from the public narrative about regional tensions. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the briefing officer, was explaining to a room full of intelligence analysts that Chinese naval activities had escalated beyond anything reported in congressional briefings. Submarine movements suggested preparation for a major operation, possibly an invasion of Taiwan. With timing that coincided suspiciously with the secret trade negotiations Maya had glimpsed at the State Department. Maya set down the sandwich platters with practiced invisibility, her ears processing information that would have sent shockwaves through Congress if it had been included in public intelligence assessments. The disconnect between classified reality and public information was becoming a pattern she could no longer ignore. As she left the DA building, Maya's phone buzzed with her next delivery assignment. The location made her pause. The same NSC office where she'd witnessed the crisis management briefing 3 weeks earlier. Dr. Sarah Kim had apparently developed a habit of ordering late dinners during what seemed to be an ongoing crisis situation. The NSC building felt different during Maya's second evening visit. Security was tighter, with additional guards and more thorough bag inspections. Guard Johnson, the nervous young man who had inadvertently given Maya access to classified areas, had been replaced by a more experienced officer who followed protocols with military precision. But Maya's invisibility remained intact. To the security personnel, she was just another delivery driver bringing food to overworked government employees. They saw her identification, checked her delivery confirmation, and waved her through without considering that she might be observing anything beyond the location of the appropriate office. Dr. Kim answered the door of office 437 looking even more exhausted than during Maya's previous visit. The crisis management center behind her had expanded, with additional analysts and more screens displaying real-time intelligence feeds. Maya glimpsed updates on Chinese military exercises that had grown larger and more aggressive, naval formations positioning themselves for what appeared to be coordinated operations. "Another all-nighter," Dr. Kim said, accepting the bags of Thai food from Maya. "This situation keeps escalating." As Dr. Kim signed the receipt, Maya noticed a classified briefing document on the desk behind her. The header read, "Project Meridian, Chinese Military Coordination with U.S. Trade Policy." The document appeared to analyze connections between the secret trade negotiations Maya had observed at the State Department and the military activities being tracked by the crisis management team. Maya left the NSC building with her mind racing. The pattern was becoming clear. American trade negotiators were secretly offering concessions to China, while intelligence analysts tracked Chinese military preparations that suggested those concessions were being coordinated with aggressive military positioning. The public was being told that trade negotiations were progressing normally while military tensions remained at routine levels. The classified reality painted a picture of American officials potentially enabling Chinese military advantages through coordinated economic and strategic policies. That night, Maya spread her accumulated notes across her apartment floor and began constructing a comprehensive analysis that would have impressed her former professors. She cross-referenced dates, personnel, and policy developments, creating a timeline that revealed a systematic pattern of coordination between Chinese military activities and secret American trade concessions. The implications were staggering. If Maya's analysis was correct, American officials were secretly negotiating trade policies that would strengthen Chinese manufacturing capabilities while Chinese military forces prepared for operations that would leverage those strengthened capabilities. The disconnect between public statements and classified operations suggested either massive intelligence failures or deliberate deception of Congress and the American public. Maya understood that her position as a delivery driver had given her access to information that even experienced intelligence analysts might not see. Her movements between different agencies and departments allowed her to observe patterns that would be invisible to personnel working within individual bureaucratic silos. Her invisibility had become a form of intelligence gathering that no trained operative could replicate. But Maya also understood that her discoveries placed her in significant danger. The information she'd gathered was classified at the highest levels, and her unauthorized access could be prosecuted as espionage. More troubling, the patterns she'd uncovered suggested corruption or treason at the highest levels of government, which meant that attempting to report her findings through official channels could expose her to retaliation from the very people she was investigating. The next morning brought a delivery assignment that would test Maya's resolve and push her intelligence gathering into more dangerous territory. The Pentagon had ordered breakfast for a senior staff meeting, and Maya found herself navigating the corridors of American military power with her usual invisible efficiency. The meeting was being held in a conference room adjacent to the office of the Secretary of Defense, with attendance that included senior military officers and civilian defense officials. Maya delivered coffee and pastries to personnel who were discussing Operation Silent Current in greater detail than she'd previously encountered. Through the partially open conference room door, Maya overheard Brigadier General Michael Torres briefing the group on Chinese military capabilities that had been enhanced through technology transfers embedded in recent trade agreements. The general was expressing concern that American trade policies were inadvertently strengthening Chinese military capabilities while Chinese forces prepared for operations that would exploit those enhanced capabilities. Defense Secretary Elizabeth Morgan interrupted the briefing with a comment that made Maya freeze in the hallway. "General Torres, your concerns about trade policy coordination are noted, but those decisions are being made at levels above this department. Our job is to monitor Chinese military activities, not to question trade negotiations that serve broader strategic purposes." Maya understood that she was witnessing a conversation about the coordination she'd suspected. Senior defense officials were aware that trade policies were strengthening Chinese military capabilities, but they were being directed to accept those policies without question. The implication was that the coordination between Chinese military activities and American trade concessions was not accidental, but part of a deliberate strategy that was being concealed from public oversight. As Maya left the Pentagon, she realized that her intelligence gathering had evolved beyond passive observation. She was now witnessing evidence of what appeared to be systematic betrayal of American interests by officials operating at the highest levels of government. The scope of the conspiracy suggested coordination that extended beyond individual agencies to include personnel across multiple departments. That afternoon brought a delivery that would provide Maya with the final piece of evidence she needed to understand the full scope of what she'd uncovered. The State Department had ordered lunch for a working session between American trade negotiators and visiting Chinese economic officials. Maya found herself delivering food to a meeting where American and Chinese officials were discussing trade agreements in the context of broader strategic coordination. The meeting was being held in a secure conference room where Maya was required to leave the food with security personnel, rather than delivering it directly to the participants. But as she waited for the security guards to process her delivery, Maya overheard fragments of conversation that confirmed her worst suspicions. Dr. Jennifer Park, the trade analyst Maya had delivered pizza to weeks earlier, was briefing Chinese officials on American military capabilities and intelligence assessments that would be affected by proposed trade agreements. The Chinese officials were providing feedback on how trade concessions could be structured to maximize their strategic value while minimizing congressional oversight. Maya listened in horror as American officials discussed methods for concealing the military implications of trade agreements from congressional intelligence committees. The conversation revealed a systematic effort to coordinate American economic policies with Chinese strategic interests while deceiving the American public about the national security implications of those policies. The evidence was undeniable. Maya had stumbled upon a conspiracy that involved senior American officials deliberately strengthening Chinese military capabilities through secret trade agreements, while concealing those actions from Congress and the public. The scope of the betrayal was breathtaking, involving personnel across multiple agencies working in coordination with Chinese officials to undermine American strategic interests. Maya left the State Department knowing that she possessed information that could expose one of the most significant intelligence scandals in American history. But she also knew that the very officials responsible for protecting national security were the ones perpetrating the betrayal she'd discovered. Reporting her findings through official channels would likely result in her elimination as a witness and the suppression of evidence that could prevent a catastrophic strategic defeat. That evening, Maya sat in her apartment surrounded by evidence of systematic treason, trying to decide how to proceed. Her invisible position as a delivery driver had given her access to information that no one else possessed. But that same invisibility meant that no one would believe her accusations against such powerful officials. She needed to find a way to document and expose the conspiracy while protecting herself from retaliation by the very people she was investigating. Maya's breakthrough came when she realized that her delivery job provided more than just access to classified information. Her routine movements between government buildings also gave her opportunities to document evidence in ways that trained intelligence operatives couldn't match. Security personnel were accustomed to her presence and trusted her invisibility to the point where they no longer scrutinized her activities with the attention they would give to unknown personnel. Over the following weeks, Maya began systematically documenting the conspiracy with the methodical precision of a trained intelligence analyst. She used her delivery assignments to photograph classified documents, record conversations, and track personnel movements that revealed the coordination between American and Chinese officials. Her worn delivery bag became a mobile intelligence collection platform, equipped with recording devices and cameras that security screenings hadn't been designed to detect. The evidence Maya collected painted a picture of systematic betrayal that extended far beyond individual corruption. American officials weren't just accepting bribes or providing isolated intelligence leaks. They were coordinating comprehensive policies that would shift global strategic balance in favor of Chinese interests while deceiving the American public about the implications of those policies. Maya documented secret meetings where American trade negotiators received direction from Chinese intelligence operatives disguised as economic officials. She recorded conversations where American military officers discussed methods for concealing Chinese military advantages that would result from proposed trade agreements. She photographed classified assessments that demonstrated American officials' awareness that their actions were strengthening Chinese capabilities for potential military operations against American allies. The scope of Maya's evidence collection was unprecedented. Her invisible status allowed her to gather intelligence that would have been impossible for trained operatives to obtain through conventional surveillance methods. Security protocols designed to prevent espionage by foreign agents were ineffective against someone who was trusted to move freely through sensitive areas as part of her legitimate employment duties. But as Maya's evidence collection expanded, she began to notice changes in her environment that suggested her activities might have attracted attention. Security screenings became more thorough, with guards examining her delivery bag with increased scrutiny. Personnel in sensitive offices became more cautious about discussing classified matters when service workers were present. The invisibility that had protected Maya's intelligence gathering was beginning to erode. The turning point came during a delivery to the CIA's analytical division, where Maya was conducting surveillance on officials she suspected of coordinating intelligence assessments with Chinese strategic interests. As she delivered lunch to the East Asian analysis team, Maya noticed that the conversation stopped when she entered the room and resumed only after she left. CIA analyst Robert Chun, no relation to Maya despite the shared surname, watched her with the trained attention of someone accustomed to identifying potential threats. When Maya left the office, she overheard Robert discussing his concerns about delivery personnel having excessive access to sensitive conversations. Maya realized that her intelligence gathering had reached a critical juncture. She had collected enough evidence to expose the conspiracy, but continuing her surveillance would likely result in her identification as a security threat. The investigation that would follow would not only end her intelligence collection, but potentially expose her to criminal prosecution or elimination by the officials she was investigating. That night, Maya made a decision that would transform her from an invisible observer into an active participant in the intelligence war she'd discovered. She couldn't continue gathering evidence indefinitely, and she couldn't trust official channels. To handle information that implicated officials at the highest levels of government, she needed to find a way to expose the conspiracy while protecting herself from retaliation by people with the power to eliminate threats to their operations. Maya's solution was as audacious as it was simple. If she couldn't trust official channels to handle her evidence, she would create her own channel for exposing the conspiracy. Her delivery job had given her access to classified information, but it had also given her something equally valuable: knowledge of how government security systems worked and where their vulnerabilities lay. Maya began planning an operation that would use her invisible status to smuggle evidence out of government buildings in the same delivery bags that had carried food to the conspirators she was investigating. She would turn her delivery route into an intelligence exfiltration network, using her trusted access to transport classified documents that would expose the conspiracy to parties capable of acting on the information. The plan required Maya to evolve from passive observer to active operative, using skills she'd never been trained for, but which her months of intelligence gathering had prepared her to execute. She would have to identify trustworthy recipients for her evidence, establish secure communication methods, and execute document transfers while maintaining her cover as an invisible delivery driver. Maya understood that her transformation from overlooked service worker to intelligence operative was irreversible. Once she began actively smuggling classified documents, she would be crossing lines that would make her a target for elimination by some of the most powerful people in the American government. But she also understood that the conspiracy she'd uncovered represented a threat to national security that justified the personal risks she was accepting. The Invisible Woman was about to become the most hunted person in Washington, carrying state secrets in pizza boxes and racing against time to expose a betrayal that could alter the global balance of power. Maya Chen had spent months being dismissed as irrelevant, but she was about to prove that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people nobody notices until it's too late to stop them. Maya's transformation from intelligence gatherer to active operative began with a delivery that would change the trajectory of American foreign policy. The Washington Post had ordered breakfast for their investigative journalism team, and Maya found herself walking through the newsroom of one of the most influential newspapers in the country. Unlike government buildings, where her invisibility was maintained through security protocols and bureaucratic indifference, the newsroom buzzed with the energy of people trained to notice details that others might miss. Senior investigative reporter David Martinez looked up from his computer as Maya delivered coffee and bagels to the editorial staff. David had spent 15 years exposing government corruption and corporate malfeasance, developing an instinct for recognizing when something didn't fit the expected pattern. Maya's presence in the newsroom wasn't unusual, but something about her demeanor suggested more than routine food delivery. Maya set down the breakfast order with her usual professional efficiency, but David noticed that she lingered near his desk longer than necessary, her eyes scanning the headlines and story drafts displayed on nearby computer screens. Most delivery drivers hurried through their assignments without interest in the content of the workplaces they visited. Maya's obvious intelligence and careful attention to detail suggested someone with more sophisticated interests than food service. As Maya prepared to leave the newsroom, David made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. "Excuse me," he called out, causing Maya to pause near the elevator. "You deliver to government buildings regularly, don't you? I've seen you around the federal district." Maya turned back toward David, her expression carefully neutral. "Yes, sir, that's part of my route." David studied her for a moment, his journalist's instincts detecting something significant beneath her professional demeanor. You ever notice anything interesting during those deliveries? Government workers can be pretty careless about what they discuss around service personnel. The question hung in the air like an invitation that Maya had been waiting months to receive. David Martinez represented exactly the kind of trustworthy recipient she needed for the evidence she'd collected. Someone with the credibility and platform necessary to expose the conspiracy she'd uncovered. But approaching a journalist also represented the point of no return in her transformation from invisible observer to active whistleblower. Maya made a decision that would reshape her life and potentially alter the course of international relations. Mr. Martinez, if you're interested in government workers being careless about sensitive information, we should probably have a conversation somewhere more private. That afternoon, Maya met David Martinez at a coffee shop in Georgetown, far from the government buildings where her surveillance activities had made her a potential target. She carried with her a worn notebook filled with 3 months of detailed observations, analysis, and evidence that would comprise one of the most significant intelligence revelations in modern American history. David listened with growing amazement as Maya walked him through her findings. The systematic coordination between American trade negotiators and Chinese military planners. The deliberate concealment of national security implications from congressional oversight. The evidence of American officials providing classified intelligence assessments to Chinese operatives disguised as economic advisors. You're describing a conspiracy that involves treason at the highest levels of government, David said, reviewing Maya's meticulously documented timeline. Do you understand the implications of what you're telling me? Maya nodded grimly. I understand that American officials are systematically betraying national security interests in coordination with foreign adversaries. I also understand that those same officials have the power to eliminate threats to their operation. David had investigated government corruption for over a decade, but nothing in his experience compared to the scope and implications of Maya's discoveries. The evidence she'd gathered through her invisible access to classified operations revealed a level of systematic betrayal that would constitute the biggest political scandal in American history. But David also understood that publishing Maya's allegations would require verification and documentation that could withstand legal challenges from some of the most powerful people in the American government. Maya, your observations are compelling, but journalism requires evidence that can be independently verified. Do you have documents, recordings, anything that proves these allegations? Maya's response surprised David with its sophisticated understanding of intelligence documentation. Mr. Martinez, I've been planning for this conversation for weeks. I have photographs of classified documents, audio recordings of sensitive meetings, and tracking data that proves coordination between American and Chinese officials. But getting that evidence out of government buildings requires more than just collecting it. Over the following hour, Maya outlined a plan that demonstrated the strategic thinking of a trained intelligence operative. She had identified vulnerabilities in government security systems that would allow her to smuggle classified documents out of sensitive buildings, using her delivery bag as a transportation method. Her routine access to multiple agencies meant she could coordinate document theft across different departments, providing comprehensive evidence of the conspiracy. David realized that Maya was proposing to conduct an intelligence operation that would rival the Pentagon Papers in its significance and exceed it in its complexity. Maya, what you're describing is espionage. If you're caught stealing classified documents, you'll be prosecuted for treason. Maya's response reflected the transformation that months of intelligence gathering had produced in her thinking. Mr. Martinez, the real treason is being committed by officials who are betraying American interests in coordination with foreign adversaries. Exposing that betrayal isn't espionage, it's patriotism. David agreed to coordinate with Maya on an investigation that would require her to actively steal classified documents while he prepared journalistic infrastructure for publishing revelations that would shock the world. The partnership between an experienced investigative reporter and an invisible delivery driver would produce one of the most important intelligence exposes in American history. Maya's first active intelligence operation targeted the State Department conference room, where she'd witnessed coordination between American trade negotiators and Chinese officials. Her delivery assignment provided legitimate access to the building, but stealing classified documents would require her to move beyond passive observation to active theft. The operation required Maya to demonstrate skills she'd never been trained for, but which her months of surveillance had prepared her to execute. She used her delivery bag to conceal recording equipment and miniature cameras, documenting classified meetings while maintaining her cover as a routine food service provider. Her invisible status allowed her to conduct surveillance and document theft that would have been impossible for trained operatives to accomplish through conventional methods. Maya's breakthrough came during a delivery to Dr. Jennifer Park's office, where she discovered a classified briefing document that provided comprehensive evidence of the conspiracy she'd been investigating. The document outlined Project Meridian, a coordinated operation between American officials and Chinese intelligence operatives designed to structure trade agreements that would strengthen Chinese military capabilities while concealing those advantages from American oversight. Project Meridian revealed the full scope of the betrayal Maya had uncovered. American officials weren't just accepting Chinese influence or providing isolated intelligence leaks. They were coordinating comprehensive policies designed to shift global strategic balance in favor of Chinese interests, while systematically deceiving Congress and the American public about the implications of those policies. Maya photographed the Project Meridian documents using equipment concealed in her delivery bag, capturing evidence that would prove systematic treason by officials at the highest levels of government. The documents included communications between American and Chinese officials, strategic assessments of how trade policies could be coordinated with military preparations, and timelines for implementing policies that would strengthen Chinese capabilities for potential operations against American allies. But as Maya expanded her document theft operations, she began to notice changes in security procedures that suggested her activities had attracted attention from counterintelligence personnel trained to identify potential threats. Badge scanners recorded her movements with greater precision. Security cameras tracked her activities with increased scrutiny, and personnel in sensitive offices became more cautious about discussing classified matters when service workers were present. The escalation came during a delivery to the Pentagon, where Maya encountered heightened security measures that suggested counterintelligence awareness of potential document theft. Guard stations had been reinforced with additional personnel. Bag inspections became more thorough, and escort procedures required service workers to be accompanied by security personnel at all times. Maya realized that her intelligence operations had reached the point where continuing document theft would likely result in her identification and arrest. She had collected enough evidence to expose the conspiracy, but she needed to execute one final operation that would provide the smoking gun evidence necessary to prove systematic coordination between American officials and Chinese intelligence operatives. The target for Maya's final operation was the NSC Crisis Management Center, where Dr. Sarah Kim continued to coordinate intelligence assessments that were being shared with Chinese officials through channels established by Project Meridian. Maya's delivery assignment would provide her with one last opportunity to access the most sensitive evidence of the conspiracy. But the security measures surrounding the NSC meant that any attempt at document theft would likely result in her immediate capture. Maya understood that her final operation would require her to choose between personal safety and national security. If she attempted to steal the NSC documents, she would almost certainly be caught and prosecuted for espionage. But the evidence in the Crisis Management Center would provide definitive proof of systematic betrayal that could prevent a catastrophic strategic defeat for the United States. The night before her final operation, Maya met with David Martinez to transfer the evidence she'd already collected and to coordinate publication plans that would ensure her revelations reached the public even if she was captured during the document theft. David had spent weeks preparing a comprehensive investigation that would contextualize Maya's discoveries within broader patterns of Chinese intelligence operations and American policy failures. "Maya," David said as they reviewed the evidence she'd collected, "you've already provided enough documentation to expose this conspiracy. You don't need to risk capture by attempting another operation." Maya's response reflected the complete transformation she'd undergone from overlooked service worker to dedicated intelligence operative. "Mr. Martinez, the evidence I've collected proves systematic coordination between American and Chinese officials, but it doesn't provide the communications intercepts that would demonstrate active betrayal of specific intelligence operations. The NSC documents include real-time intelligence sharing that constitutes active treason, not just policy coordination." David understood that Maya was determined to execute one final operation regardless of the personal consequences. Her months of intelligence gathering had evolved from curiosity about government operations to dedicated commitment to exposing systematic betrayal of American interests. The invisible delivery driver had become someone willing to sacrifice her freedom to protect national security. Maya's final operation began with a routine delivery assignment to the NSC building, but her preparation included sophisticated intelligence techniques that would have impressed trained operatives. She had modified her delivery bag to include concealed compartments for stolen documents, equipped herself with miniature recording devices, and developed extraction procedures for smuggling classified materials out of the most secure building in Washington. The NSC building felt different during Maya's final visit, charged with the tension of ongoing crisis management and heightened security awareness. Dr. Sarah Kim met Maya at the office door rather than allowing her to enter the crisis management center, a precaution that suggested increased awareness of potential security threats. But Maya had anticipated security changes and developed alternative methods for accessing the classified documents she needed. While Dr. Kim signed the receipt for her dinner order, Maya used equipment concealed in her delivery bag to record conversations from the Crisis Management Center and photograph documents visible through the partially open door. The intelligence Maya gathered during her final operation provided the smoking gun evidence that would complete her investigation. She recorded conversations between American intelligence analysts and Chinese operatives, coordinating real-time intelligence sharing that constituted active betrayal of ongoing operations. She photographed classified communications that demonstrated American officials providing Chinese intelligence services with assessments that would compromise American allies and strategic positions. But as Maya prepared to leave the NSC building, she encountered security personnel who had been briefed to identify potential threats among service workers with routine access to sensitive areas. The counterintelligence operation that had been developing for weeks reached its climax as Maya found herself facing scrutiny that would determine whether her intelligence operation succeeded or resulted in her capture as a foreign agent. Security Chief Patricia Morrison, a 20-year veteran of counterintelligence operations, intercepted Maya near the building exit with the professional authority of someone trained to identify and neutralize security threats. "Miss Chen, I need to speak with you about some irregularities we've noticed in your delivery activities." Maya realized that her transformation from invisible observer to active operative had finally attracted the attention she'd managed to avoid for months. The evidence she'd collected could expose one of the most significant intelligence scandals in American history, but only if she could successfully transfer that evidence to David Martinez before being arrested for espionage. The conversation with Security Chief Morrison revealed that counterintelligence personnel had been tracking Maya's activities for weeks. analyzing her movement patterns and investigating her background for evidence of foreign intelligence connections. Maya's sophisticated understanding of government operations and her methodical approach to intelligence gathering had raised suspicions that she might be a trained operative working for foreign adversaries. "Miss Chen," Security Chief Morrison said, "your educational background and your systematic observation of classified operations suggest capabilities that exceed what we would expect from a routine delivery driver. We need to understand whether your activities represent curiosity or something more concerning." Maya understood that she was facing the moment that would determine whether her intelligence operation achieved its objectives or ended with her prosecution for espionage. The evidence she carried could reshape American foreign policy and expose systematic betrayal by government officials, but only if she could convince Security Chief Morrison that her activities represented patriotic whistleblowing rather than foreign espionage. Maya's response demonstrated the complete transformation she'd undergone from dismissed service worker to sophisticated intelligence analyst. "Chief Morrison, I understand why my activities might appear suspicious, but I need you to consider the possibility that the real security threat comes from officials who are systematically betraying American interests in coordination with foreign adversaries." The conversation that followed would determine the trajectory of American intelligence policy and international relations. Maya outlined her discoveries with the systematic precision of a trained analyst, presenting evidence of coordination between American officials and Chinese intelligence operatives that constituted systematic betrayal of national security interests. Security Chief Morrison listened with growing concern as Maya detailed her findings. The scope and sophistication of the conspiracy Maya described exceeded anything in Morrison's experience with foreign intelligence operations or domestic security threats. If Maya's allegations were accurate, they revealed systematic compromise of American government operations at levels that would constitute the greatest intelligence failure in the nation's history. But Morrison also understood that Maya's activities, regardless of their motivation, had involved unauthorized access to classified information and theft of government documents. The legal implications of Maya's intelligence operation were clear. She had committed espionage, even if her intentions were patriotic rather than treasonous. The resolution came when Morrison made a decision that reflected the complexity of Maya's situation and the significance of her discoveries. Rather than immediately arresting Maya for espionage, Morrison chose to investigate her allegations through official channels while protecting her from retaliation by the officials she'd been investigating. "Ms. Chen," Morrison said after reviewing Maya's evidence, "your activities have violated multiple federal laws, but your discoveries suggest systematic failures that require immediate investigation. I'm placing you in protective custody while we verify your allegations and determine appropriate responses." Maya's placement in protective custody marked the beginning of the final phase of her transformation from invisible delivery driver to crucial intelligence asset. The evidence she'd collected would trigger congressional investigations, prosecutions of senior government officials, and fundamental reforms of American intelligence oversight procedures. The investigation that followed Maya's revelations confirmed the scope and significance of the conspiracy she'd uncovered. Project Meridian had indeed coordinated American trade policies with Chinese military preparations, systematically strengthening Chinese capabilities while concealing those advantages. From congressional oversight, senior officials in multiple agencies had provided classified intelligence to Chinese operatives, compromising ongoing operations and strategic positions. David Martinez's investigation, published simultaneously with the official government probe, provided comprehensive documentation of the conspiracy that Maya had risked her life to expose. The Washington Post series, based on Maya's evidence, became one of the most significant journalistic exposes in American history, triggering congressional hearings and criminal prosecutions that would reshape American intelligence operations. The congressional hearings that resulted from Maya's revelations provided her with the platform to present her findings to the American public and international community. Maya testified before the House Intelligence Committee with the authoritative expertise of someone who had conducted one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations in recent history. "Committee members," Maya said during her testimony, "my position as a delivery driver provided me with access to classified operations that revealed systematic coordination between American officials and Chinese intelligence operatives. The scope of this betrayal extends beyond individual corruption to include coordinated policies designed to shift global strategic balance in favor of foreign adversaries." Maya's testimony captivated the committee and the national audience watching the hearings. The transformation from overlooked service worker to crucial intelligence asset demonstrated that sometimes the most important discoveries come from people with the courage to observe carefully and act decisively when confronted with systematic wrongdoing. The aftermath of Maya's revelations included criminal prosecutions of senior officials in multiple agencies, fundamental reforms of intelligence, oversight procedures, and cancellation of trade agreements that would have strengthened Chinese military capabilities. Project Meridian was exposed as one of the most significant intelligence failures in American history, with implications that extended to international relations and strategic policy. Maya Chen's journey from invisible delivery driver to crucial intelligence asset became a case study in the importance of recognizing that valuable insights can come from unexpected sources. Her willingness to risk everything to expose systematic betrayal of American interests demonstrated that sometimes the most important battles for national security are fought by people who refuse to accept that their observations don't matter. The woman who had been dismissed as just another gig worker delivering food to important people had proven that importance isn't determined by job titles or security clearances, but by the courage to act when confronted with evidence of systematic wrongdoing. Maya's transformation from the person nobody noticed to the person everyone was looking for demonstrated that sometimes the greatest intelligence assets are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone to recognize their potential. Maya Chen concluded her congressional testimony with words that would be remembered as a defining moment in American intelligence history. "I started this journey as someone who was invisible to the people making decisions about national security. I learned that sometimes being invisible is the greatest advantage you can have, because it allows you to see things that people in positions of authority choose to ignore. The real question isn't whether someone like me should have been observing classified operations, but whether the people responsible for protecting this country were doing their jobs." The invisible woman had become the most visible symbol of the importance of vigilance, courage, and the willingness to act when institutional authorities fail to protect the interests they're sworn to defend. Maya Chen's legacy would extend far beyond her specific discoveries to include fundamental changes in how American intelligence operations recognize and respond to systematic threats from within. The months following Maya's congressional testimony transformed her from an unknown delivery driver into one of the most recognizable figures in American intelligence history. But the transition from whistleblower to public figure brought challenges that Maya had never anticipated during her covert operations. The same invisibility that had protected her during intelligence gathering became impossible to maintain once her face appeared on every major news network and her story dominated international headlines. Maya found herself living in a secure government facility while congressional investigations continued and criminal prosecutions of the officials she'd exposed moved through federal courts. The protective custody that had initially seemed like temporary security became an extended isolation from the normal world she'd known before her discoveries changed everything. Her studio apartment, motorcycle, and delivery job belonged to a previous life that felt increasingly distant as the implications of her revelations continued expanding. The FBI's investigation into Project Meridian revealed that Maya's discoveries represented only the beginning of a systematic compromise that extended far deeper into American government operations than anyone had initially understood. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, the lead investigator assigned to the case, briefed Maya on findings that demonstrated the conspiracy she'd uncovered was part of a decades-long Chinese intelligence operation that had infiltrated multiple levels of American government. Maya, Agent Torres explained during one of their regular briefings, the evidence you collected has opened investigative paths that we didn't know existed. Project Meridian wasn't an isolated operation. It was part of a comprehensive Chinese strategy to influence American policy through coordinated infiltration of government agencies. The scope of the Chinese operation stunned even experienced counterintelligence professionals. Maya's evidence had exposed coordination between American officials and Chinese operatives across the State Department, Defense Department, National Security Council, and Central Intelligence Agency. The systematic nature of the infiltration suggested planning and execution that had taken years to implement and would require fundamental restructuring of American security procedures to address. Maya's role in the ongoing investigation evolved. Beyond providing testimony about her observations to include analysis of patterns and connections that her unique perspective could identify. Her months of systematic intelligence gathering had given her insights into government operations that complemented traditional counterintelligence methods, and investigators found her analytical capabilities surprisingly sophisticated for someone without formal training. Agent Torres often consulted Maya about investigative strategies and analytical approaches that might reveal additional compromised operations. Maya, your ability to observe patterns across different agencies gives you a perspective that our analysts often miss. You've seen how these operations connect in ways that specialists focused on individual departments might not recognize. The criminal prosecutions that resulted from Maya's discoveries became some of the most significant espionage cases in American legal history. Dr. Jennifer Park, the State Department trade analyst who had coordinated with Chinese officials, faced charges that included conspiracy, espionage, and treason. Her trial revealed the sophisticated methods Chinese intelligence had used to recruit and coordinate American officials over extended periods. Maya testified in Dr. Park's trial with the composure of someone who had become accustomed to presenting complex intelligence analysis to audiences of legal and security professionals. Her testimony provided crucial evidence about how Project Meridian had operated and the systematic nature of the coordination between American officials and Chinese operatives. Dr. Park was not simply accepting bribes or providing isolated pieces of information, Maya testified. She was coordinating comprehensive policy development with Chinese intelligence operatives who were directing her activities through systematic strategic planning that extended over multiple years. The trial proceedings revealed details about Chinese intelligence operations that shocked even experienced counterintelligence professionals. Dr. Park had been recruited during graduate school through academic exchange programs that provided Chinese operatives with access to promising American students who could be cultivated for future intelligence operations. Her rise through State Department ranks had been supported by Chinese guidance and resources that positioned her to influence critical policy decisions. Dr. Park's conviction on all charges, including a sentence of life imprisonment without possibility of parole, established legal precedents for prosecuting systematic intelligence operations that involved long-term infiltration of government agencies. The case demonstrated that Maya's discoveries had exposed not just policy coordination, but comprehensive espionage operations that constituted acts of war against American interests. Similar prosecutions followed for other officials Maya had identified through her intelligence gathering. Marcus Thompson, the State Department intelligence analyst who had discussed classified assessments with Chinese operatives, received a 40-year sentence for systematic betrayal of intelligence operations that had compromised ongoing missions and endangered American personnel overseas. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the Defense Intelligence Agency officer who had coordinated military assessments with Chinese strategic planning, faced court-martial proceedings that revealed the extent to which Chinese intelligence had penetrated American military operations. Her conviction and sentencing to military prison demonstrated that Maya's discoveries had implications for military security that extended far beyond policy coordination. The congressional investigations that continued parallel to the criminal prosecutions provided Maya with opportunities to influence fundamental reforms of American intelligence oversight procedures. The House Intelligence Committee invited Maya to participate in policy development sessions, where her unique perspective contributed to designing security measures that could prevent future infiltration operations. Representative Sarah Martinez, the committee chair who had overseen Maya's initial testimony, consulted regularly with Maya about legislative proposals that would strengthen counterintelligence capabilities while protecting legitimate government operations from excessive security measures that could impair effectiveness. Maya, Representative Martinez explained during one of their consultations, "Your experience demonstrates that effective intelligence gathering often comes from unexpected sources. We need security procedures that can identify systematic threats while recognizing that valuable insights might come from people outside traditional intelligence frameworks." Maya's contributions to policy development reflected the sophisticated understanding of government operations she had developed through her intelligence gathering activities. Her recommendations included systematic analysis of personnel movement patterns, enhanced security screening for service workers with routine access to sensitive areas, and coordination mechanisms that could identify suspicious activities across multiple agencies. The international implications of Maya's discoveries extended far beyond American domestic policy to include fundamental reassessment of Chinese strategic capabilities and intentions. Intelligence agencies worldwide studied the Project Meridian case to understand how Chinese operations had achieved such systematic penetration of American government operations, and to develop countermeasures that could prevent similar infiltration of their own systems. NATO intelligence officials consulted with Maya about patterns she had observed that might indicate similar Chinese operations targeting allied governments. Her analytical methods and observational techniques became subjects of study for intelligence professionals seeking to understand how systematic surveillance could be conducted by personnel operating outside traditional intelligence frameworks. Maya found herself traveling to intelligence facilities across the United States and allied nations, sharing her experiences and analytical methods with professionals who recognized that her approach represented significant innovations in counterintelligence methodology. The delivery driver who had been dismissed as irrelevant had become someone whose insights were valued by the most sophisticated intelligence organizations in the world. The media attention surrounding Maya's story continued evolving. As additional details about Project Meridian emerged through ongoing investigations and prosecutions, David Martinez's original Washington Post series had been expanded into a comprehensive book that became a bestseller and was being adapted for film production. Maya's story had captured international attention as an example of how individual courage could expose systematic threats to national security. But Maya remained uncomfortable with the celebrity status that her discoveries had created. During media interviews, she consistently emphasized that her observations had been possible only because institutional authorities had failed to recognize systematic threats that should have been identified through proper oversight procedures. "I didn't expose this conspiracy because I was particularly brave or intelligent," Maya said during one television interview. "I exposed it because the people responsible for protecting national security weren't doing their jobs. The real story isn't about me. It's about systematic failures that allowed foreign operatives to compromise American government operations for years without detection. Maya's perspective on her role in exposing Project Meridian reflected the analytical thinking that had made her intelligence gathering so effective. She understood that her individual actions had been significant, but she also recognized that the systematic nature of the threat required institutional changes that extended far beyond any individual's contributions. The personal costs of Maya's transformation from invisible service worker to prominent intelligence figure became apparent as she struggled to adapt to a life where privacy and anonymity were no longer possible. The protective custody that had initially provided security became a form of isolation that separated her from normal human connections and activities. Maya's relationship with her family had become complicated by security concerns that made regular contact difficult and potentially dangerous. Her parents, who had emigrated from Taiwan decades earlier, found themselves subjects of media attention and security scrutiny that disrupted their quiet lives and raised questions about their own backgrounds and potential connections to international operations. The financial implications of Maya's situation were equally complex. While she had been offered substantial compensation for book and film rights to her story, the ongoing legal proceedings and security requirements made it difficult for her to access or manage those resources. Her transformation from economic struggle to potential wealth was occurring within constraints that made the practical benefits difficult to realize. Maya's romantic life had become virtually impossible to maintain, given the security restrictions and media attention that surrounded her activities. The few relationships she had attempted to pursue had been complicated by background investigations and security concerns that made normal intimacy and trust extremely difficult to develop and sustain. But Maya also found unexpected sources of support and connection within the intelligence community that had initially viewed her as an outsider. Many career intelligence professionals recognized that her discoveries had exposed systematic failures in their own organizations and had contributed to reforms that would make their work more effective and secure. Agent Torres had become something. Approaching a friend during the months of collaboration on ongoing investigations, their professional relationship had evolved into mutual respect and personal connection that provided Maya with someone who understood the complexities of intelligence, work, and the personal costs of dedication to national security. "Maya," Agent Torres said during one of their regular meetings, "you've changed how we think about intelligence gathering and threat identification. Your work has made all of us more effective at protecting the country." The long-term implications of Maya's discoveries continued emerging as investigations revealed additional connections and patterns that demonstrated the comprehensive nature of Chinese intelligence operations targeting American government systems. Project Meridian had been connected to similar operations in academic institutions, technology companies, and research organizations that together constituted a systematic effort to influence American strategic capabilities. Maya's analytical methods were being studied and adapted for broader counterintelligence applications that could identify systematic threats across multiple sectors of American society. Her approach to pattern recognition and systematic observation was being incorporated into training programs for intelligence professionals who needed to understand how comprehensive infiltration operations could be detected and disrupted. The educational institutions that had dismissed Maya's potential during her academic career found themselves studying her methods and achievements as examples of how unconventional approaches could produce extraordinary results. Georgetown University invited Maya to deliver lectures about intelligence analysis and threat identification that attracted capacity audiences of students and faculty. Maya's presentations at academic institutions emphasized the importance of systematic observation and analytical thinking over credentials and institutional authority. Her message resonated with students who understood that valuable contributions could come from unexpected sources and That institutional recognition often followed rather than preceded significant achievements. Intelligence work isn't about having the right security clearance or working for the right agency, Maya told audiences of aspiring intelligence professionals. It's about having the courage to observe carefully, think systematically, and act decisively when you recognize patterns that others have missed. The technological implications of Maya's discoveries led to development of new surveillance and analysis systems that could identify systematic patterns of suspicious activity across multiple agencies and organizations. Her methods for tracking personnel movements and identifying coordination between different operations were being adapted for automated systems that could provide early warning of infiltration attempts. Maya consulted with technology companies developing counterintelligence systems that incorporated her insights about how systematic surveillance could be conducted by personnel operating outside traditional intelligence frameworks. Her contributions to these development projects ensured that future security systems would be designed to identify the kinds of threats she had discovered through her unconventional intelligence gathering. The psychological impact of Maya's transformation from anonymous service worker to prominent intelligence figure required ongoing support from mental health professionals who specialized in helping individuals adapt to extreme changes in life circumstances. The isolation, pressure, and responsibility that came with her discoveries had created stress that required professional intervention and support. Dr. Maya Chen, the psychologist assigned to help Maya manage the emotional challenges of her situation, worked with her to develop coping strategies that could help her maintain psychological stability while fulfilling her ongoing responsibilities to national security, investigations, and public education about intelligence threats. Maya, Dr. Chen explained during one of their sessions, your experience represents one of the most dramatic life transformations in recent history. The psychological adjustments required are extraordinary, and it's important to recognize that seeking support is a sign of strength rather than weakness. Maya's work with Dr. Chen helped her understand that her emotional responses to the dramatic changes in her life were normal reactions to extraordinary circumstances. The isolation, anxiety, and sense of responsibility she experienced were predictable consequences of her transformation from private individual to public figure with ongoing obligations to national security. The spiritual dimensions of Maya's experience led her to explore philosophical and religious frameworks that could help her understand the meaning and purpose of her discoveries. Her conversations with religious leaders and philosophers provided perspectives on how individual actions could serve broader purposes and how personal sacrifice could contribute to collective security and well-being. Maya found particular comfort in Buddhist concepts about interconnectedness and the importance of acting with compassion and wisdom when confronted with systematic suffering or injustice. Her discussions with meditation teachers and spiritual advisors helped her develop practices that could provide stability and peace amid the ongoing complexities of her public role. The legacy of Maya's discoveries continued expanding as the full implications of Project Meridian became apparent through ongoing investigations and international cooperation. Her story had become a case study in how individual courage and systematic observation could expose threats that sophisticated intelligence organizations had failed to identify through conventional methods. Maya understood that her transformation from invisible delivery driver to prominent intelligence figure represented both personal achievement and institutional failure. Her success in exposing systematic threats demonstrated the importance of individual initiative and courage, but it also revealed systematic weaknesses in intelligence, oversight that had allowed foreign operations to compromise American security for extended periods. As Maya reflected on her journey from economic struggle to national prominence, she recognized that her greatest achievement had been maintaining focus on protecting national security rather than pursuing personal advancement. Her commitment to exposing systematic threats had required personal sacrifices that continued affecting her daily life. But she understood that those sacrifices had served purposes larger than individual success or recognition. Maya Chen had proven that sometimes the most important intelligence discoveries come from people who refuse to accept that their observations don't matter. Her transformation from the person nobody noticed to the person everyone was studying demonstrated that valuable insights often come from unexpected sources and that institutional authority is less important than individual courage and systematic thinking when confronting systematic threats to collective security. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.